There is a kind of loss that doesn't come with a funeral. No one gathers. No one sends flowers. No one asks how you're holding up. Because the people you miss are still alive. They're just far away. Not in distance, but in presence. You still know their voice. You still recognize their face. But the connection you once felt has grown quiet. You replay old memories in your mind. The way they used to talk to you. The way they needed you. The way your name used to mean something urgent. Now, conversations feel shorter. Calls feel rushed. Messages feel delayed or forgotten. And you tell yourself, this is normal. That this is just how life goes. But your heart feels something else. It feels the space. It feels the distance. It feels the quiet grief of loving someone who no longer reaches for you the way they once did. It hurts more than you ever expected. Because you're not missing strangers. You're missing your own children. 1. When the relationship quietly changes. At first, you don't notice it happening. There is no argument, no dramatic goodbye, no clear moment where things break. The relationship just changes. They still call, but not as often. They still visit, but more quickly. They still love you, but from a distance that keeps growing. You begin to sense it in small ways. They no longer ask for your opinion the way they used to. They make decisions without telling you first. They talk more about their lives, and less about yours. You listen, you nod, you smile, and you tell yourself, this is what growing up looks like, that this is how life is supposed to go. But inside, something feels unsettled, because the change wasn't mutual. You didn't pull away. You didn't stop caring. You didn't stop being their parent. Your heart stayed where it always was. And that's what makes it hurt. You're not grieving a child who left. You're grieving a closeness that slowly disappeared without ever saying goodbye. You remember when they needed you, for advice, for comfort, for reassurance. Now, they need you less, and no one prepares you for how painful that can feel. This kind of loss doesn't come with language, so you don't talk about it. You carry it quietly, wondering when love started to feel so distant, even though it never stopped being love. The hardest goodbyes are the ones that happen slowly, while everyone pretends nothing has changed. 2. When you start asking yourself what you did wrong. At some point, the distance stops feeling like life being busy. It starts feeling personal. You replay conversations in your head. You reread messages, looking for tone. You wonder if you said something wrong or didn't say enough. You ask yourself questions you never thought you'd have to ask. Was I too much? Was I too strict or not strict enough? Did I push too hard? Did I let go too easily? And slowly, love turns into self-doubt. You don't blame your children. You don't want to. So you turn the questions inward. You search your memory for mistakes, moments you could have handled differently, words you wish you could take back. Even when there's no clear reason, your heart looks for one. Because uncertainty hurts more than blame. It's easier to believe I must have done something wrong than to accept that life sometimes pulls people apart without anyone being at fault. You don't tell anyone about these thoughts. You carry them alone, quietly rewriting your past, trying to understand how something so full of love ended up feeling so distant. And the cruelest part is this. You're still the one who cares deeply. You're still the one who worries. You're still the one who waits. But now, you're also the one wondering if your love somehow became too much or not enough. When children pull away, parents don't just miss them, they question themselves. 3. When you realize you're no longer part of their inner world. One day, you notice something small, and you can't unsee it. They tell you things after they happen, not before. Big decisions are already made by the time you hear about them. You learn important details through passing conversation, or worse, through someone else. And that's when it settles in. You're no longer inside their inner world. You're not the first person they turn to. You're not the one they process life with anymore. They share their worries elsewhere. They celebrate milestones with others first. They build a life that doesn't naturally include you. And again, you tell yourself, this is healthy. This is independence. This is how adulthood works. But your heart doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in belonging. It aches not because you want control, but because you want connection. You don't need to be consulted on everything. You don't need to be involved in every decision. You just want to feel like your presence still matters in the quiet places of their life. Being on the outside hurts not because you're excluded intentionally, but because no one tells you when the door quietly closed. And so you stand there, still loving, still caring, still holding space, while wondering when you stopped being part of the world you once helped build. Independence doesn't hurt. Disconnection does. 4. Loving them without knowing where you belong anymore. You still love them the same way. That never changed. You still worry when they're quiet. You still feel relief when you hear their voice. You still carry their childhood in your heart, as if it happened yesterday. But now, you don't always know where you belong in their life. You hesitate before calling. You pause before sending a message. You wonder if this is a good time, or if you're interrupting. You never had to think this way before. Once, your presence was natural, expected, welcome. Now, you measure yourself. You don't want to overstep. You don't want to seem demanding. You don't want to be the parent they feel obligated to respond to. So you shrink your needs. You wait longer than you want to. You say less than you feel. You accept crumbs of connection and tell yourself they should be enough. But love doesn't disappear just because its place becomes unclear. It becomes quieter, more careful, more restrained. And that restraint is painful, because loving your children was never supposed to feel like walking on emotional eggshells. You don't want to control their life. You don't want to pull them back. You just want to know that there is still a space for you, not as a memory, not as an obligation, but as a living presence in the life of the person you love most. Loving from a distance hurts most when you don't know how far away you're allowed to be. If these words feel close to your heart, you don't have to do anything right now. Just know this space exists for you. This channel isn't here to fix you or to tell you what you should feel. It's simply a place where you don't have to explain your silence, your longing, or the love you still carry quietly. If staying here for a few more minutes feels comforting, you're already in the right place. And if you ever want to return, to feel understood without being questioned, this space will be here, waiting. 5. Why you stay silent about how much it hurts. You don't talk about this pain because you're afraid of what it might cost. You're afraid that saying something will make them pull back even more, that expressing your hurt will sound like blame, that your honesty will feel like pressure. So you choose silence. You tell yourself they didn't mean to hurt you. They're busy. They're building their life. They'll come around. You protect them from your sadness. You protect them because you love them. And because of that love, you convince yourself that your feelings should wait. You swallow disappointment before it reaches your voice. You hide longing behind understanding words. You turn hurt into patience. From the outside, you look calm, reasonable, supportive. But inside, you're carrying something heavy. Because silence doesn't make the pain disappear. It just makes it lonelier. There are nights when you replay the same thought. If I don't reach out first, would they notice my absence at all? And you hate yourself for thinking that. You don't want to be the parent who needs reassurance. You don't want to ask for proof that you still matter. So you stay quiet. And that quiet, over time, becomes its own kind of grief. You're not silent because you have nothing to say. You're silent because you're afraid of losing the little closeness that remains. 6. Learning how to love without losing yourself. At some point, you realize something has to change. Not in how much you love them, but in how much of yourself you lose in the waiting. Loving your children was once effortless. Now, it requires restraint. And that restraint can slowly empty you if you're not careful. So you begin learning a quieter kind of love. A love that doesn't chase. A love that doesn't beg for response. A love that doesn't measure itself by how often they call. This doesn't mean you love them less. It means you're learning to protect your heart while still keeping it open. You start by noticing your own life again. The mornings that belong to you. The routines that don't depend on anyone else. The small joys that don't require permission. You remind yourself that your worth doesn't disappear just because your children are busy living. You're still here. You still matter. You still have a life that deserves attention. And when you reach out, you do it gently, without expectation, without urgency. A message that says, I thought of you, not, why didn't you call? This kind of love feels different, less painful, more grounded. It allows connection to exist without costing you your peace. You can love your children deeply without abandoning yourself in the process. 7. Accepting the distance without letting it define you. Acceptance doesn't arrive all at once. It comes slowly, often after exhaustion, after you've waited long enough, after you've replayed the same questions, after you've realized that forcing closeness only deepens the hurt. Accepting the distance doesn't mean you agree with it. It doesn't mean it feels fair. And it certainly doesn't mean it stops hurting. It simply means you stop letting it define who you are. You begin to understand that your children's distance is not a verdict on your worth as a parent. It is a reflection of their stage of life, their pressures, their distractions, their unfinished growing. You gave them roots. Now they're learning how to grow branches. That process is messy, imperfect, and often emotionally unaware. You don't erase your hope. You don't shut down your heart. You just loosen your grip. You allow the relationship to breathe in its current form without punishing yourself for what it used to be. And slowly, you begin building emotional ground that doesn't collapse every time they don't call. You anchor yourself in friendships, in routines, in quiet moments that remind you you are still whole, still valuable, still worthy of connection. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's choosing peace over constant heartbreak. Distance doesn't mean you failed as a parent. It means the relationship is changing, and you are allowed to change with it. 8. A message for the parent who still loves quietly. If your children feel far away right now, please hear this. You did not stop being important just because they stopped reaching out the same way. You did not lose your value because your role changed. And you did not fail as a parent because the relationship feels different than it once did. You loved them when they needed you. You stayed when it was hard. You gave without keeping score. You showed up in ways they may not fully understand yet. That kind of love does not disappear, even when it's not acknowledged, even when it's not returned in the same form, even when it feels invisible. Your presence lives quietly in the way they navigate the world, in the values they carry, in the strength they lean on when life becomes heavy. They may not say it, they may not show it often, but love like yours leaves a mark that time does not erase. You are allowed to miss them. You are allowed to grieve the closeness you once had, and you are allowed to keep living without shrinking your heart around that loss. You are more than a role, more than a phase, more than a memory. You are still here, still loving, still worthy of connection, in many forms, in many places, in this chapter of life. And that still matters.